I've got to shake the tree, right? I've got to pull some money out of nowhere. This is crunch time.
But it's the emotional tiredness too.
I thought I was going to vomit with tiredness.
You are switched on that entire time. You're there to work.
But I think they also need to believe that you're a pillar of strength, right? You always walk in the room expecting like they're all nailing it because they've all got phenomenal companies. It feels very lonely, but the reality is it's actually probably quite a common experience. It's an extraordinary role.
And how did you do it? Let's talk about the dinner that you had last night, Mark. So you said that there were some challenges amongst some founders that you were that you experienced.
Yeah. So like, if I'm looking a little shiny on camera and I'm drinking a lot of water, it's because there was quite a lot of wine flowing, and it was super cathartic. It was a small group of founders at growth stage, sort of 10 million ARR and above, just being raw and honest, and. Like for me, these moments are priceless, right? No one in my family friendship group are really going through, it's kind of rare. And everyone says it's very, very lonely, right? Being an entrepreneur, especially a CEO role. And so to be in a room with people where they can be just completely open and honest, it's very cathartic. It's interesting to see. You always walk in the room expecting like they're all nailing it because they've all got phenomenal companies. Some of them are doing incredibly well. And all the challenges that we were talking about, like literally everyone was just like nodding, yeah, me too. And it's, it feels very lonely, but the reality is it's actually probably quite a common experience, but we don't talk about it. And we're not really, maybe apart from doing interviews and things like this, podcasts, like, in our marketing or whatever, like we have to project strength.
Yeah.
And then there is an argument for, it's interesting. A good friend of mine, I was having a really tough time, like earlier this year. I had to fire a load of people, had to rebuild a team, took a load of shit for that. No one ever agrees with being fired, right?
No,
it was the right decision. It was the right decision, right? Without a doubt. And I don't mean anything ill to the people I let go, because I'm sure in another role, in another company, they're going to do fine, right? Mm-hmm. Like they're not bad people. They're not bad at what they do, but they weren't the right fit for us, and that was abundantly clear, right? Like, but it's hard, right? You go through all of that, and then I was having a really tough week. I remember having this really tough week, and I was talking to a friend of mine, really open about it, and then she said, actually, she was like, "Don't let them see you like this." And I was like, okay. She goes, look, it's fine. Like, I'm glad you're talking to me. I'm glad you're being open about it, but don't let them see this side of you.
Who is them? Is that customers or is that staff?
I think customers. I think particularly the team, mm-hmm. But I think also the customers. Because there is. I was a bit surprised to hear that, to be honest, but I think she was right to a degree. I think you can be vulnerable, and I think that's good. And I think a modern CEO should be more empathetic, like not a complete kind of narcissist, in fact, like often they were back in the day. But I think they also need to believe that you're a pillar of strength, right? Because if you look like you're wobbly, then not, look, because it is a house of cards. Like the whole thing, really, it can come down pretty quick. I've run a company for a long time, and I've been through ups and downs, and it takes a hell of a lot of time to build something, but not a lot of time to destroy it. Despite what people might think, I think, and a lot of it is faith. Do I have the faith in this business, in this leader, in this industry, in the future, whatever it might be? It comes down to vibes, frankly.
Yeah.
Vibes is important, strangely enough, and that's why I kind of slightly worry about Britain at the moment, because I think the general vibe is it's like that. Even though there's so much good in the country, but we can come on to that later if you want. And I was like, okay. And she's like, look, if you're feeling this bad right now, don't go in. Don't let them see it, right? I was like, I kind of need to show my face. And this, like, not if your face is this. Mm. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. And I kind of, there's a middle ground there where I think if you did just put on a brave front, like, that sounds kind of like more like my dad's era, and that's not healthy.
No, we all know that.
That's not healthy, right? But I think there is something about you need to sort of, kind of go out in the world. Like, your problems are here and they're in a safe space with whatever friends and family. But there is a point where you go out and go, but now I'm presenting strength. I'm presenting clarity. I'm presenting confidence and stuff like that. So, yeah, I found that to be a really interesting time, because I think we like all things, we swing, don't we? Right? We swing from probably being ultra like ignore your feelings, get over it, to maybe too much, like that, and not appreciating that actually people do need to see this strong thing. And it's bloody difficult, right? It's bloody difficult to do that.
So what did you do then? So did you take the advice that she said?
I did, yeah.
And did you spend a few days away from the office?
I did, yeah.
Away from the staff, and sort of rediscover that brave face that you can come back into the office?
Yeah, basically. I try to recall it now. I mean, obviously, I wasn't taking time off work. I was still doing what I needed to do, because we were kind of in the middle of reforming a team, and it was pretty hardcore. I think, I did a bit more from home. I did all the classic things you do when you need to rebuild yourself up a bit. Like, got really good sleep. Sleep's super important. Took dog for a decent walk. Cancelled anything unnecessary. Like, it's kind of just like, I can get rid of that. Put a bit more space in to think, and then talk to people, right? Talk to people who build you up, right? Who let you vent, let you be vulnerable, right? But aren't necessarily then going to go and tell everyone about it. It's kind of odd because now I'm telling you on the camera, but I mean, now it's past, right? But I know that will happen again, because it always does.
And I guess that's the value of, for example, the event you were at last night, where you can all sit around the table and you can have these conversations amongst people who understand what you're going through.
Yeah.
And that, I guess, is really important. And if there is somebody out there right now who is a young entrepreneur, for example, who doesn't have that circle, what sort of advice would you
find it?
Find it, really, yeah.
I mean, the reality is, like, you can find it. I think you've got to really be intentional about it. There are networks out there. There are groups out there. Like, just ask, and find people around the similar stage or a little bit further ahead, but not too further ahead. But I didn't have this for probably the first half of our journey of about 10 years. And, like, friends and family did their absolute best to be helpful. But, like, when you're in the middle of, like, a sort of crisis, like usually the early days it's funding, right? Like, where the hell am I going to, get funding from? Our runways is running out. Like, it's all this kind of stuff whilst trying to grow at the same time. And they'll, like, it's going to sound sort of silly, but it might be like, have you thought of going on Shark Tank or something? You know what I mean? It's not quite like that, but it's sort of, the advice they give is very obvious, as it were, because they're not from that world, right? And then you're in there, and then you've got to go, oh yeah, that's an interesting idea. Yeah, I could go on Dragon's Den or something like but you're like, well, but it's not, and it just makes you feel a bit more lonely, right? Because then you're like, okay, now I don't want to offend them. I don't want to, like, go, what the hell are you talking about? Like, and so you retreat even more,
That's really interesting.
And that is not good. It's not good.
So,
right?
so you end up becoming more lonely when okay, so you're going to people initially and you're thinking that isn't the right advice that I need right now. So then you almost say,
their best,
I'm just going to rely on myself a lot more, as opposed. But what you're actually saying is you need to go out there and find, like, your little tribe of other entrepreneurs at a similar stage to you who really understands what you're going through. Yeah,
I'd say so. It doesn't need to be lots of people, and yeah, I think you reach this little moment where you're like, well, I guess it's all on me then, and that is, it's terrible. And to be honest, it gets worse, right? Because in the early days, right, it's a funny thing being a CEO of a company of 5. It's like, I'm the CEO. It feels kind of like weird, right? But we're over 100 people now, and we'll keep on growing and stuff. But when you're with that small team, they know you, the person, right? There's a point at around maybe 60, 70 people where you don't know all of them that well. Also, you've got to a certain position and status, and you have power, right? They have power and influence, where you are not. There's you, the role, and there's you, the human, and those two things separate. Where at the beginning days they don't, and if you did do that, you come off quite weird and fake. And then you get to this point where maybe you have to, like, don't let them see you, right? And that's actually probably appropriate. So it only gets worse. And even with your co-founders, right? Because one of the things about co-founders is, at the beginning, it's all egalitarian, right? Your co-founders, I'm the CEO, whatever. But like ultimately, you make decisions together. But there does come a point where you are the CEO and you will disagree on something. And frankly, your call has to be the one that we all go with. That doesn't necessarily always go down well, because you're like, that's not how we used to do things. But it's like, I'm either the CEO or I'm not the CEO.
Yeah.
Right. And it's an extraordinary role. I'm very, very pleased that I have done it. And I will not miss it. Like I'll see this all the way through, but I'll never do it again.
Okay.
Absolutely no way. Absolutely no way. I'd happily maybe help others, but there's absolutely no way I'll do this again.
Is that in reference to building a business, or is that in reference to being the CEO?
Being the CEO, I've built and started loads of different companies over the time, and I think it's in my DNA to create, to do things. But I will very, very happily not be the CEO at the next role, which doesn't mean like I'm like living a hell right now. I'm not. I'm on this journey and I'm doing it, and I'm going to go all the way to the point where I think that I'm no longer the right person to do it, and I still think that's probably 5 or more years away. But I have absolutely no desire to do it again.
For anyone out there now, because it's called Ambitious Minds, this podcast.
Right,
and
yeah.
this
Sorry.
doesn't just
be more ambitious. Yeah. Go be a CEO. It's great.
This doesn't just appeal to people who are entrepreneurs, but it also appeals to people who are progressing in their corporate careers. So I would actually love to understand, let's say, for example, somebody is listening today who has ambitions to be a CEO. My girlfriend is one of these people as well.
Right, yeah.
What is it then about being a CEO that has deterred you from wanting to do it again?
I mean, I think it's just... Put it this way, it lends itself to people who don't give a shit, right? Like imagine how much shit Elon Musk gets a day on Twitter, right? He tweets something out, he tweets something kind of controversial, and like 1 million people literally tell him to fuck off, right? That would crush me, right? I don't want 1 million people to tell me to fuck off. He doesn't care. Like he's like Teflon. And I was like, well, whatever. Trump's the sort of same. And maybe that's like very, very big, but the problem is like we want CEOs to be like normal people, and then we condition them to be anything but, right? And I think that's problematic because, like I've been told in the past, again, in a nice way, like you're too sensitive, you care too much what people think. You don't ignore what people think. They're like, okay, you take that advice and you compound that advice, you turn into a complete narcissist, right? Like, oh, don't worry about that. Oh, it's only this, it's only that. Like, oh, you're too sensitive. I was like, all right, well, isn't that good? No, apparently not. So let me be more positive about it. Like, sorry, the question was,
what is it about being a CEO that has deterred you from wanting to do it again? And you can talk about the positives of being a CEO too. Because
there's so many, right? So this is the thing. I think if you've got the capability to do it, you should do it. But I don't think it's something... I mean, fair play. If you want to repeat it, that's fine. But I would say the reason you'd probably want to repeat it is you didn't feel like the first time you got to where you wanted to go. Whereas I've already... If you talk to me like back in 2015, I've already surpassed where I thought I'd even get to. So I'm not... It's like, for me, I'm in that all upside down. It's like, all right, well, I got to this. Well, I never thought I'd even get there because statistically... like 0.1% get to here, and I've got a free hit at the future. So I suppose I don't think I'll walk out of this thinking like, if only I, like, so that bit I guess is satisfied. And maybe if that wasn't satisfied, I'd have a different answer for you. I think, it's also a role where, all roles grow, as companies get bigger and as you move to enterprise customers, whatever. So we all adapt and grow. But this role changes like dramatically. Like what you do in year 1, what you do in year 3, 5, 10 it's a completely different thing, right? You have to reinvent yourself. And the key is you have to be one step ahead of the business, right? So you're evolving faster than the business is because that's the job, right? And then as you evolve into that thing and you jump into the next stage, you've got to kind of like, well, drag everyone there is one way of putting it, or inspire everyone there. But either way, there's this kind of force field of energy of like pulling things forward constantly. And we're all human. Like, it's exhausting, right? It's really exhausting. So, yeah, that's. I hope that doesn't. With ambitious minds, I hope that's not putting people.
No,
off.
I think that what I really want to do from this podcast is give people the almost unfiltered version of what it looks like, what the journey looks like. And I saw something on your LinkedIn. It's actually this morning, but I think it flagged up from a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And you were in America, and you did 5 cities in 3 days, and the headline was, "I'm tired."
I know, it's funny because because the guy that helps me make the content and stuff is an amazing company. I'll give a shout out actually, James Shake, brilliant, right? Like, awesome guy, James and Harry. They're like, just film all the time. But I'm like, sometimes the camera goes on and you've got to say something, but it's like 1 a.m. in South Dakota and you've been up for 14 hours. It's like, what are you thinking? And I just kept saying, I'm tired. And it was kind of funny that all the way through the end, it's like, tired. That was a very hardcore week. Very, very hardcore week. And the reason I did that was because we were missing our quarter quite badly, right? Like, at the end of July, we talked about earlier, right? Sacked a load of people. My team was down. I was rebuilding this team. July is a terrible month for us anyway, because that's kind of the holiday month for Americans. We like, at the end of July, I was like, we're gonna miss this quarter bad. I've got to go, and I was like, right, I've got to shake the tree, right? I've got to pull some money out of nowhere, originate money, and close it inside the quarter to hit our number at the end of September. And the only way I know how to do that, I've been doing it. I've had to hit payroll every month in my previous business. We didn't have money. I know what shaking the tree looks like, and you've got to be pretty strategic. You've got to be like, who's realistically going to do it, and then you've got to get on the road, get out for dinner. You've got to originate, and I did. I went out there and I did this, and I shook the tree, and 1 week before the quarter, golden apples fell out of it, and we hit the number.
And does that almost become like do you feel like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy? The more I do that, the more money it will generate, or do you have to almost impose limits on yourself?
Yeah, you got to put limits, because I can't, like, what that video doesn't show you is I landed at 7 a.m. on Saturday morning in Heathrow, was utterly broken for 2 days.
Wow.
Because why wouldn't I be? Like, did you see what I did?
I did.
And it's not like, the travel's tiring. Guess what the day's like? 8 hours with your customer. And I love my customers, don't get me wrong, but 8 hours. And it's not like, even at lunch, you're talking, you're constantly giving out this energy, and the conversation goes a bit flat, and you reignite it, and you're like, it's, you're jet lagged, and then you go, we went back to the hotel. Thankfully, we had like 45 minutes before we then went out for dinner and drinks with them afterwards. And one of the members of my team was with me, said, I thought I was going to vomit with tiredness, when I went back to the hotel, because we'd done 8 hours and we got to go and do another 3. And guess what? This is crunch time, right? The dinner is where I'm going to ask him for the money. The dinner is where I'm going to say, look, is there anything we could do to get this over the line before the end of the quarter? So it's like, that pressure, right? You're sat in the hotel room, you're fucking knackered. You've just done 8 hours walking around, like, taking photos, doing all these things. And it's not phony, I really enjoy it. And that's on day 3, right? I've already done 2 days of this. And then you're like, right, it's do or die now.
So, and it's not physical tiredness from the jet lag.
It manifests
and just staying, but it's the emotional tiredness too. You are switched on that entire time. You're there to work. And I think that not a lot of people see this. I think that sometimes we look at CEOs
that's really true.
Because you've
fancy
got
dinner. Oh, this looks fun.
And this is when you're in your early 20s. One of the things that you do want, a job perk would be, I get to travel for work. Now, the reality of that is no one wants to be jumping on a plane, leaving their family when they're in their 40s, or I know people in their 50s who are commuting all over the world for their job. And it's like, I just want to be at home with my family right now. I want to get like a normal routine in my life, and some sleep, but you've got to do it. Yeah.
one of the things that kind of got a bit weird, with the whole pandemic stuff, is this whole thing that we can do everything online. It's like, not true, right? This will be a better interview because we're sat here, right? Rather than me at home on Zoom and you doing the normal stuff I do, right? And most of my podcasts are like that. This is going to be better. I think this is going to be more different, right? Because there's energy in the room.
And it's intimate.
Yeah. And I feel like, right, okay, actually, let's talk about it. So, and, it is difficult, I'm going to sound a bit middle-aged man here, but like, it is difficult incentivizing younger people now even to get to the office, let alone get out onto the road, right? And going, and I still get it. Like, I turn up to a customer site, right? We work a lot in manufacturing, right? So one of our big sectors is manufacturing, deskless workers. So I'm like down in South Carolina, not in Charlotte. That's where I landed. I've driven 50 miles south. I'm in this tiny town in South Carolina, going into a huge manufacturing plant. I don't know, but like my background's not manufacturing. My background's software engineering. But this is my customer, and I'm going to be here for hours. And you walk, as you get out the car and you walk towards security, and they've got the hard hat ready for you and all that sort of stuff, you feel like, oh my God, like, what am I going to do? Like, am I going to ask intelligent questions? Do I even know what's going on? Like, I'm a complete phony. Like, I don't, like, culturally, I'm totally out of my depth. The one thing is, like, I guess the one nice thing about being a bit older now is I do back myself. Like as much as every time I walk into these situations, I think, oh, today's the day, today's the day. It all goes horribly wrong. It never does, right? It always goes better. And in the rear view mirror, you always walk away energized, and you've learned something, and you've noticed things, right? Because the beauty of doing site visits with your customers is, like, my customer is not just that human that I speak to on Zoom. All of the humans are my customers, like the end users of screens and things like that. And you walk around the floor and you start to spot things which they don't even know. And you just ask. One of the nice things about not being from their world is you can kind of ask questions like a 5-year-old, right? Which are usually the best, where they haven't even, they've seen it so much, they just kind of like don't even notice it. And you're like, why is that way? And they're like, I have no idea. It's a great question. Like, what is that? So, sorry, it's a bit of a ramble, that one. Yeah, like, you got to go out. Like, you got to go out in the world. The real world is real, And if you don't choose to, if you don't front up to it, you're never going to succeed.
Yeah,
no, absolutely no way.
I work in the wealth management industry, and we are entrusted by our clients to manage their finances. And you could do that on Zoom, and some people do. Some people do an annual review.
Okay, I doubt you'd be really successful though.
But I believe that you have to be seeing them in person, because it's in those moments when you get the truth. You understand like what the objectives are, and you work together. You're a team. It's not a transactional relationship on the other end of a screen. You have to build that trust, and you build that trust in person, and then you also build better connections, and it leads then to a much more like fruitful long-term partnership, relationship, whatever. I don't think that you get the same when you are on the other end of a screen personally.
No, not at all. I think, not that I know the industry that well, but one of the things I've heard from wealth management is that the main job of a wealth manager is to stop their clients doing really bad decisions when times are hard. Yeah. Like, the portfolio's down, like, sell everything. And it's actually to be like, hold, it's, this happens. It's like, basically don't react to it in a like, calm down. But like, if you've got someone in a quite like, especially with their money, right? Like, that they've probably worked very hard to get in many cases, getting them to trust you when you're going through the valley of darkness, right? That is a relationship, right? Because, it's not like you can sort of pull out the chart and go, well, if you look at the stock market over 30 years, you'll see that this is just a blip, right? Whatever. But you're in a very emotional point at that point. And I have to look you in the eye and be like, do I believe you? Do I trust you? Do I actually think you've got my best interests at heart, or are you just trying to save the client, or whatever it might be?
Or are you bullshitting? Do you not know what is happening yourself?
For me, like, the most important contract of all is the social one. Like, we could lawyer up, do all these things like NDAs, like whatever. Like, but if I look someone in the eye and I say this, look me in the eye and tell me that you really believe this, and you do, that for me is the strongest social contract. That's how humans became the dominant species, is our ability to cooperate when we maybe have misaligned incentives, like different trust structures or whatever. The ability for us to do that and for that to actually be successful is the innate kind of reason we are successful, right?
It's how we've got here by working together, and exactly that.
I'm pretty sure that Zoom is not helping that.
No, particularly when you've got your team members who are off screen or whatever. I actually want to touch on that for a second because we spoke earlier on about some challenges with staff. You've had to let people go, but you've experienced this. You've been in your business for long enough, and you've been pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. What's your attitude towards working from home or to Zoom meetings and those sorts of things?
Well, funnily enough, it actually hasn't changed. So we had a previous business, right? We started in 2004, so we've been going a long time. And that was all in the office because that had to be, right? So we didn't really have a work from home option. We were an agency, so if you weren't in the office, you basically weren't at work, right? Like pretty much. And when we started ScreenCloud in 2015, I kind of was like, "Whoa, it's a more modern world now. We don't need to be in the office every single day like I used to." And I just kind of designed what I felt to be the best because I could, right? It's like another go at doing it. So I kind of went to a 3-2 model back in 2015, which is like 3 days in with the team, 2 days at home doing the deep work. Team. You obviously, there's no point going in and put your headphones in all day, right? So you go in and you do the team stuff, and then you save the deep work where you're maybe writing something or whatever. Those are the days you do at home. And that worked great. And we were kind of flexible as well because, like we were working a lot with America, so we're often having to do demos in the evening. So if people wanted to go to the gym in the afternoon or whatever, I was like, go to the gym now because we've got a demo at 9 p.m. If we're working till 11 o'clock at night, like just come in late tomorrow. It doesn't matter. Like, so we had this flexibility built in. By necessity, but also because it was just better. It just made more sense. So for me, in the pandemic, when again it's like, oh no, we're all remote forever, I was like, oh, I don't think that works because otherwise I would have done it.
Yeah,
I would have done it. Like, who loves the tube? Like, oh yeah, I really love the Northern Line. It's phenomenal. But I didn't do that because it didn't work. And also, we in the early days, especially, we were developing talent. Really successful people don't join early stage startups. They can't afford them. It's not worth the risk for them. So you're taking on bright people who are inexperienced, and you've got to develop them. And that's also wonderful. That's one of the best things about this whole journey is developing really good talent is so rewarding. But you're not going to do that on Zoom, because you need to hear them. Oh, I heard the phone call. We talked with the customer. Have you thought about this? It's the mini coaching that goes on. That doesn't happen in meetings. This doesn't happen. I don't know where everyone. I don't know. Yeah, it's beyond obvious that doesn't work, right? And we've just got to. The sooner that people just get to peace with that, the better.
What do you think will happen in the future then? Would it be like a 3-day working week or something in the office?
Yeah, I think the 3-2 seems to be where most people are settling. Did see an interesting thing actually this week, which is how does this change with AI? Because now I'm using AI every single day, and it's like a superpower, right? And it's very obvious when people aren't, because. So I take a transcription of pretty much every meeting I do now, and then I stick it into Claude and I interrogate Claude, and I can create unbelievable assets out of meetings. And anyone who then goes, oh, I made some meeting notes, it's like 2 bullet points. You're like, okay, right. Well, my superpower is way stronger than yours. Also, I can go back to that and I can interrogate it in different ways. I once turned a meeting, we had this really interesting meeting, into basically training manual and playbook. And then I turned it into a podcast, and it's like, there you go, there's the onboarding, right? It's done. Just from a brainstorm, whereas previously that would have just been a great brainstorm and then what happens next, right? So anyway, the thing I saw the other day was someone saying who had been a completely remote company. It was the founder of Gumroad. I forget his name now, but he had gone completely remote, right? So he's almost the biggest advocate for remote, saying, right, I'm canning remote now. What I need is people, a nucleus of people together doing that ideation, brainstorming, and then adding AI superpowers so they can go off and just boom. But actually the blocker is if I have to wait for you to reply to me or come back to me or whatever. And that's the time. They call it clock speed. Have you ever heard of clock speed?
I haven't, no.
So clock speed is a reference to, I believe it's CPUs, right? It's kind of way of kind of figuring, something to do with that, I think. Got to butcher that a bit. But clock speed can also be referred to company culture. It was a really interesting thing I saw from a VC. And he's like, I judge companies' cultural health by their clock speed. And the parameter is, if you're in a meeting and you say, let's follow up on that afterwards. The clock speed is, do you almost say, hey, stay on the call, we'll do it now? Is it, can I talk to you tomorrow? Or is it, how about next Wednesday, 10 a.m.? How's that good for you? Right? Or maybe never.
It doesn't happen.
Right? It doesn't happen at all. And he's like, the clock speed. Like, what's the clock speed of your business? If it's over a week, on average, if that's your clock speed, not going to make it.
That's interesting. So it's a delay between idea and action.
Yeah, maybe not even idea. That's like a thing to do.
Yeah,
it's like, let's book in something for next week. And I've seen it at ScreenCloud, where I saw, we had a new customer come in, and then we were like, right, we put these things together for our enterprise things. We put win teams together, like cross-functional win teams. Who's like, right, let's win it. And the AE, and I'm not throwing him under the bus here, he's a good guy, but like he looked at everyone's diary and was like, I think we could probably do Tuesday 10:30. This is like Thursday. I'm like, well, how about this afternoon? Okay. I was like, well, but people have got an internal meeting. Cancel it, move it. Like, we've got an enterprise customer. Like, that's more important.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I didn't. Oh, yeah. It's like, no, you've got permission. This is more important. And if we do it this afternoon, suddenly the clock speed's just gone up because now I've got 2 days more, because the deadline for submission doesn't change.
Yeah.
And also, like, you've got to build momentum. You've got to build energy into this thing. And
that's a really, really key point, actually, talking about momentum, because how many people have sat there with a good idea and they speak about it and they're like, that's, we should do that. And then it goes into your Apple Notes or you speak about it again in the future. The best time to actually act on that is now. It is right there and then. When you feel the most passionate about it, and to then do it. But you're right, at the clock speed, I've never heard this before, but it's a fantastic way, and trying to just reduce that time, because that time is friction to doing the thing. And then the more you reduce that time and the friction, the more probability is of it getting done.
And to bring the conversation a bit full circle on that, guess who the biggest influence of clock speed in the business is?
The CEO.
Which is, again, so you have to, and there are days where I'm like, I could do, like, I wouldn't mind a bit of manana sometimes. I'm like, but if I let that happen, like, that starts at the top, it filters all the way down. So I've got to create this unreasonable tension, this constant, like, no, faster, more, we can do it. So it really comes from you. But it's important. It's important, and it energizes other people, And funnily enough, like, on that one, it looks like we're going to win that customer, right? Like, we actually flew out to see them properly, a site visit, proper. It's a big enterprise account, really, really big, and we obliterated the competition on that by fast response, by going above and beyond, by researching them, by knowing more. Like, when we got on the calls with them, we'd read the annual report. We'd done our research. AI gives you all this stuff anyway. And, we'd all listened to the Gong call. And we'd written notes, collective notes on a Google Doc of all the things we thought, what mattered to them. And we'd crafted a narrative of, like, how we were going to be the best. And they had mentioned the competitor that they were also looking at. So we built our whole narrative, like, partly how we will beat them, but also how, obviously, most important is how we could create a great solution for the customer. We absolutely smashed it out of the park. But that wouldn't have happened, I don't think, without that initial burst of energy and that like galvanization. Like, we're going to win this. We're not just going to win this. We're going to obliterate this, right?
Obliterate the opposition.
Absolutely.
So we've not actually mentioned, we've not spoken much about the company so far. But that's
ScreenCloud.com, it's digital signage. Go and have a look. If you want some screens with the guys.
What I'm really keen to understand about ScreenCloud is, one, what you do, but where did the idea come for digital signage for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I won't pretend to have invented the category. So I mean, our history is that, Luke and I, especially, of the three founders, like, we are developers from the 90s. Luke being a way, way, way more sophisticated developer than me. I'm pretty middle of the road, bad, really. But we both saw the internet for the first time when we were teenagers, and independently, obviously we didn't know each other then. We were like, this is the future, right? Like this medium is unbelievable what we could achieve with it. It was still pretty. I mean, obviously the internet's also produced a lot of bad things, but back then it was very much all kind of upside and good and democratization of information and all this sort of stuff that, like, I still believe it is and can be. And so we were web developers, right? And we came together. That's how we met, through work. As Luke, a web developer, at that point I transitioned more into being a technical project manager, although I still did do development for about another 5-10 years after that. And what we noticed is, so back in 2004, like, you needed me and you needed Luke to build a website of any form. And if you wanted to build an app, and then when it gets to mobile, you needed us to build a mobile app. But then we could see that that was commoditizing, offshoring to Poland or India, and it was kind of hard to differentiate ourselves. But we had these skills. Like, we built hundreds and hundreds of applications for the internet for big brands like BBC, British Airways, Nestle, right? Like, we're good. We're good at what we do, and we've done a lot of it. But we were doing it for other people, right? We were doing it and selling the time, and that is a relentless thing as well. So, both of us wanted to produce products for ourselves rather than just for other people. And we did a whole load of them. I mean, we must have done 20 odd. Some of them failed, some of them worked pretty well, all of them bootstrapped out of profit from the agency that we did. And ScreenCloud was just one of them. It wasn't like we did any in-depth research or anything. And I suppose the main driving function was, as web developers, why can't we just build stuff for screens? Like, we could build stuff for everything else, but, like, ask a web developer to build something for a screen. They'll kind of look at you blankly and be like, maybe some of them have Android on there. Like, I mean, they don't know, right? Like, it's not part of the family, and it's crazy because the TV screen, is the original screen.
Yeah,
that's what my dad saw in the 1950s, right? And yet it's the lost screen when it comes to digital. And most of some people might think, well, that's not true because I see screens everywhere and they're showing digital content. But they're showing images, videos, looping around. They're internet-connected screens, but they're not running the web. The web isn't living and breathing on there. And actually, it's super challenging because it's a highly fragmented hardware landscape. A lot of them, like Samsung and LG, they have their own proprietary operating systems. They're all running all various different things. And to be honest, screens don't work very well. Like, walk through the airport, count the number of black screens, blue screens, error screens. You'll see loads of them.
I've got one on my phone that it was actually in my office. And
right, there you go.
Like, service error. And that was only a couple of days ago. So I took a photo actually to show you because...
Error message of the week.
Yeah, I've seen this from your LinkedIn actually.
Yeah. And the reason I do that is not to shame people, because we have broken screens too. Like, I'm not going to pretend ScreenCloud's perfect. But it's to highlight that this medium, which we're so comfortable with, just hasn't been as advanced as it should be. And ScreenCloud's mission really is to bring it back into the family and say, look, if you're a web developer or anything, the web should live on here too, right? Like, it should live here too. And I think it's a really underutilized communication channel. Mainly it gets utilized for commercial reasons. So for, like, menu boards, advertising, retail, and some of those screens are incredible. Very, the events side of things, we were talking about events earlier, like huge screens, like making a real immersive digital experience. But then you go into most offices, or even worse, as I said, manufacturing, deskless workers is kind of like where we focus. They get their communication from a cork notice board with a bit of paper stuck to it, like from the 1980s. But 80% of the workforce today, of global workforce, is deskless. Right? Manufacturing, logistics, education, retail, hospitality, construction, healthcare. Like, none of these people sit at a desk all day. We do. We're the minority. And yet all of the software that's being built, pretty much all of it, is for the desk worker, the knowledge worker, not the deskless worker. And the screen, putting a screen up in that environment digitizes that environment instantly, and gives you a channel to those people. So that's what we kind of work on. And anyway, to answer your question, it started with curiosity, I suppose. Like, why is the web not present here, and what can we do about it? Then we bumped into the reason why, which was mainly the hardware. And we're like, oh God, right, this is tough. And that took a load of time. I mean, Luke, kudos to Luke. Like, he relentlessly went at that. And we've now got to a place where we've pretty much solved that problem. There's still more to do. And then the next one is like, all right, now how do we get good content up there? Like, how do we basically inform the world like to use screens properly? Because people still put up terrible content on these screens. And I think it's quite exciting what the future here, because AI is going to help us transform that content into more appropriate ways for the screen. And I feel like, this is kind of what, if we talk about kind of motivation, like when I talk about this stuff, I feel pumped. I feel like ready to go. I'm like, we've earned the right to change this category, to make this channel of communication actually good, actually reliable, and actually useful to a large number of people in the world who previously were getting communicated to by paper on a wall, which is nuts, right? That's cool. Like, if that's what my life's work is, and if I get even close to nailing that, like, and I feel we're on the path to, but we haven't done it yet, then that is satisfying. Like, that's cool.
And I think that anyone listening here will now start picking up on the presence of screens in the workplace.
You're going to see it everywhere.
You will start to see it everywhere, like in train stations, in airports, in your office, in your place of work, in the gym, for example. Like, I'm a member at Fitness First, and I know that above the treadmill, it has a TV screen advertising Fitness First products or gym classes and that sort of thing.
Yeah, but have you? So I also, funny enough, I actually teach at Fitness First. Strangely enough, it's the other thing. But those videos haven't changed for 2 years. They spent so much money, and they're very high production, right? But it's still looping around the same. I even know some of the instructors who are in those videos, and I'm like, that hasn't changed, right? Because they blew all their budget on amazing videos, and then they're like, oh, what next? But what if that was more data-driven, those screens? What if it actually, instead of just showing random instructors from another place or even models or whatever, what if the people on those screens were actually the PTs that you see on the floor, and you found out a bit more about their background, and maybe that would make you approachable? Oh, I see that you've done this. Well, or if you're a specialist in injury, shoulders or whatever, like, I've got this thing, like, what if we could make it smarter? What if we could make that screen actually relevant to the environment it's in?
That is a fascinating point. And is that where you think AI helps, or is that where is it the solution that you've created?
Well, I think also has to start with our imagination. Like, people just don't think you could even do it. Like, so it's part of me doing stuff like this, I suppose, is to spread the word that, by the way, you can. Yeah. But you couldn't in the past so easily. We're here to help that. And then it's like a penny drop. None of this is rocket science. Like, none of it, right? But most people aren't thinking about it, right? They're not noticing it. They're not aware, and that's fine. And and our job is to educate.
The funny thing about not being aware, and my brain right now is thinking, if you had, let's say you had screens in the street, for example, at like 2 p.m. when everyone's getting that post-lunch crash, if there was an advert for the local coffee shop, for example, and then people like walk past that and then subconsciously go, oh, feeling tired now, I need a coffee, and then go to that coffee shop. And like that is essentially how you can lead people with screens in a very, because you can't do this with a sandwich board, for example, because you can't change it. But you can change a screen based on the time of day, the demographic of people that are around there. Is it people commuting into work, or is it people commuting out of work?
Well, exactly.
All those different things.
So back in the day, if that was a poster, right? Imagine you're like advertising Heineken on the tube. You're going to be advertising to people at 7 a.m. on a Monday. It's not really. Maybe a couple of people might be like, oh, okay. But most people are like, that is not relevant. But maybe if it's Friday night and they're just getting off the tube and about to go to the pub, maybe they'll pick Heineken because they saw it. But like, if it's print, like, as you say, it's sort of ever present.
Yeah.
I mean, outdoor advertising has figured this out a long time ago, which is why so many has moved it to screens and things like that. But what if we could do that in our own work environment? For health and safety is a big part of what we do. Actually getting that message at the right time where it might actually change your behavior is much more powerful than just sort of like, oh, I went on a training course a month ago. But like, it's actually, you got to catch the person at the right time, in the right mood and influence. I saw this, I was talking about health and safety, I saw this just about personalization, this absolutely phenomenal thing. So I was on one of these site visits, and it wasn't on a screen, right? Someone had done in one of the offices, they cut out bits of card, why we work safely, right? And they'd stuck it on a wall, and they'd got printouts of people's children, people's dogs, some guy's beloved truck, right? It's like to influence, like we work safely, not just to protect ourselves and protect our colleagues. It's that little girl, right? We don't want mum or dad getting injured because her life depends on it. Now that's powerful, right? And that's real. That is not just a random little girl. That is actually someone's little girl who works there, right? That is going to make me think twice about cutting a corner on health and safety, more than just a generic campaign of like, oh, you need to put your hard hat on, like just like it, but we don't get it. But that changes me.
Yeah, it's
right?
emotional.
That's powerful, right? And it's super powerful. And the medium of screens gives you the chance to do it, whereas the medium of print doesn't.
Yeah.
Right, because you can't do 1,000 different versions of the poster. Like you got to do the generic one and put it up and hope it works. And again, I'm not trying to shame that as a medium of doing it. People try their best, but we've got a better way. Like there is a better way, and now we've got to unlock that, right? And we've got to empower people, and we also empower people on the ground to update those screens. It can't all be done from head office. So there's a lot of really cool stuff about subconscious cognition, which is what you're talking about influence, and it's not just about parting people spending more money on burgers or whatever. It can have a huge influence in our working environments, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and we've seen this in our office. So consumer duty was something that came across from the FCA, and like you go to the coffee machine, they've got like a little screen on there, and like it had like, have you done your consumer duty training, for example?
Yeah.
But there are so many ways that, just thinking out loud, that you can apply this, because are people more tired on a Friday afternoon or a Thursday afternoon, and like does the message need to be different, for example? And there are so many. Yeah, exactly, it does. Like, but as you say, like with the sort of pin with the notice on the boards, you absolutely can't change it. Is this something then that you found initially, but then you've really developed a passion for over time? Really? Yeah,
basically, yeah. I mean, to be honest, like if you go back to the origin story, me and Luke didn't work, and David as well, but probably slightly less so. But me and Luke really didn't want to just keep doing relentless projects. ScreenCloud seemed like a good idea. There was a bit of a draw initially, like customers seemed quite into this idea. There was a bit of a wave happening, so things like Amazon Fire TV was coming out at the time.
Yeah.
So there was a kind of, that consumer hardware, it doesn't cost much. We could build on top of that. So that's a bit different. It's a bit disruptive. But to be honest, we jumped on that bandwagon to get off the last one that we were on. And then really my passion for it as a medium has developed over like it was curiosity to begin. Now it feels like a mission.
Yeah.
But that's grown. And it's grown because of the customers, right? Because they let me come into their world and see the problems they've got, which I had no background in, obviously. But I went in and I was like, wow, okay, whoa, God, you really need our help. And they were like, yeah. And I was like, okay, that's cool. It's because when we first started, I thought it probably would just be shops using it to sell stuff, and there's nothing wrong with that. No, we still do have lots of customers do that, but I think this bigger thing, that's really interesting. And then as I got into the industry, which was a new one for me, and I walked around, I didn't see any other CEO in this segment that we're talking like I do about this. Like really. Most of them have evolved out of the audiovisual industry, so that they're more interested in the screen itself, and that is developing rapidly. There's loads of cool, like they do amazing stuff. I'm more interested in what goes on the screen, and I'm really interested if what goes on the screen isn't just an image and a video, but is actually digitally powered in some way, because I think that has infinite possibilities of what could be done, and very, very few people are considering that.
You mentioned there about your clients, your customers. Whereabouts geographically? Are you all over the world?
We're all over the world, but 70% of our revenue is USA.
Is it? Okay.
UK is only 10%. And then it's more like I suppose you call it the English-speaking world. Like, I mean, Western Europe, like Scandinavia, tends to work in English for software. So, yeah, but basically US is the biggest market.
What was that leap like when you decided we want to go to America? And how did you do it?
There was no leap. Did it on day one.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'd had the fortune, I suppose, there's a bit of themes coming to this, which is good. It's not just an incoherent ramble. So we were based up in Old Street, and I had fortuitously, I suppose, got to meet generation one of what the startup founders were. And a lot of them have gone through this thing where they would build in the UK, get up to a certain point, raise a Series A, and then they would take the leap to America. Maybe one of the founders would move. And a lot of them really struggled with that because maybe what worked here didn't quite work there. And as they're trying to make that work, maybe this thing starts to slow. And I'd seen that play out a lot. And some of them never make it, right? And some of them make it, but they're all like, oh, it's really tough. And when I was looking at ScreenCloud, I was like, well, there's no, like, it's not like we have we're not working in finance or law or property. Like, the tech works irregardless of where you are in the world. All these screens are manufactured in China and Korea and stuff like that. So we've got a universal industry, if you like, and so there's no and people are going to find us through the internet. So why don't we just appear to be American?
Yeah.
So we Americanized our English on the website. I got an American phone number that forwarded to my mobile.
Wow.
I got a forwarding address, because they were paying by check. Some of them still try to do that. So there was a US address that would then forward to my flat in Balham. It's all very sophisticated. And then, when I talked to customers, I worked American hours, so I was working quite late in the night. And if they said, "Oh, where are you based?" I was like, "Well, I'm in London, but I'm often in America." With a British accent, they're all right with that. And then we got a US Inc. subsidiary. So to all intents and purposes, we presented as American.
Interesting.
And we did that for 3 years. I didn't have a US salesperson until July 2018. I did have a support person on the East Coast a bit earlier to cover the time zone. But we like from day one, the money came from the US. Because the reality is, if you're going to build a successful SaaS product, you have to be in America. If you're going to be big, America's the market, right? Or China. Good luck. No, America. So why delay? Unless you, because of, we're building fintech or whatever, right? I get granted, that's going to be challenging. But yeah, to go to America day one, like go at the biggest market. Why delay? There's no need to.
That's really interesting. So when you started the business, were you bootstrapped or did you go out to investors at first?
So it was a bit of both, right? So we had profit in our previous company, and we sort of ring fenced an amount of profit, which would be, that's like the MVP fund, right? Let's see if we can get this to a point where it looks like it's got a future. Then what we would do is we'll separate this as a new entity. So it will effectively sell it to itself for £1 or whatever over to be a new company, and then we'll raise money. We'll basically consider this a completely new thing, new employment contracts, all that. So we sort of separated it out. So that was probably the first year that we funded it ourselves, and then I went out and raised angel money, which I'd never done before. Which was, there's an interesting story about that. Shall I tell you about that?
Yeah, please.
Is this going to be like the longest ever podcast? So I'd never raised money before, and obviously imposter syndrome, etc. So I'm not sure if they still do it as much these days, but they used to have these big angel network get-togethers in London, right? And it was really good. Like organizations of angels, they'd all come in, and then startups would go on the stage and basically have 5 minutes to pitch, and then if you're interested, you'd go off and do stuff. So I contacted all these angel networks because I didn't know anyone, right? Who do I know to give me money? So I went there, and the first one, I went in, and they were very prescriptive about how to do it. So they said, right, you've got to wear a suit, which okay.
As a web developer.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. You got exactly 5 minutes. Like, they were really strict about it. And that made me quite uncomfortable. And I'd never done it before. And there was a lot of people. I was talking like 300 people in here. And then they did this horrible thing where they gave everyone this ability to vote live, like some kind of like weird X Factor thing or whatever it is.
The red buzzer.
Yeah, pretty much. Not to cut you off, but to basically to be like, are you going to do well or badly? I know, talk about pressure. I didn't back myself. So I had notes, and I went up in my suit, trembly voice, reading the notes, and I came about 5th out of 10. Right. And there were some really interesting companies on there. Probably the most interesting one actually came last because this guy was like a proper academic. He knew everything about cement. Right. And he had worked out a way of predicting through vibrations or something when cement was about to crack. And this was preventing things like oil leaks and stuff. that's insane technology. His slides had like 5,000 words on them. He had his long hair. He was like all over the place. And like no one wanted to invest in it. And funny, so I came like fifth, so I basically got nothing, and no one was interested pretty much. And then the guy that won, right, was this super charismatic guy who didn't wear a suit, just ignored them, but fuck it, I'll do it my way. Came out and had this incredible energy. And his startup was basically putting physical stickers on parked cars as advertising. Like, I mean, it's probably shit, let's be honest.
Yeah. Low barrier to entry.
It's just kind of weird and like, really, like, you know, or whatever. I mean, but he had captivated the room. And at the end of it, I saw like 50 people around him. So I completely bust. And this was June, right? And they don't do these things over summer. And I needed to raise in summer. So there was one more of these events, like 2 weeks later, sort of similar format. Thankfully for that, with the hideous voting thing. And I was like, right, I've basically got 2 weeks to go from sort of like zero to hero. And so I kind of like locked myself in a room and I said my pitch out loud, to a point where it was like muscle memory. I found my confidence, even though I was shit scared, and you know, I didn't wear a suit. I wore what was comfortable. I mean, I contacted the organizer and said, "Can I go first? I want to go when the energy's high, and I also don't want to be intimidated if someone comes up and does an awesome job. Right? I just want to get in and go." And I took a cab there. I didn't even get like public transport. I was like, I literally got in the zone as best I could, and I just went for it. The pitch itself was the same. Like the content of the pitch was fine.
Okay,
right?
The only thing that was different was your energy and
my energy, my projection of confidence. I guess pitch. This is another theme coming up today. And I let it all on the field, right? And I got all my angel investors who are still angel investors in ScreenCloud today and have followed on and backed me. All of them.
They've added more money at a later date as well.
Yeah. From that day, from absolutely no interest at all to everything I needed, which I'm very proud of. Like I'm proud of that. And it's not. I'm not telling that story to be like, oh, what a great guy, but like, it's an interesting story because it shows you what you can achieve, even when you don't believe in yourself. And like, you know, the pressure, right? It's like, if it was a movie, you know, you're in the locker room, you're like, you got one shot, like, you know, whatever. But the reality is, I did have one shot because after that, there was no more angel events until after summer when all these bougie people have all buggered off to south of France or whatever. But ScreenCloud would be dead, right? Because we wouldn't.
Wow. Because
we hadn't any money.
So that's a sliding doors moment, and you had to step up to the plate.
And that's happened multiple times, right? Like, yeah, we've been weeks away from dead. Right, we're profitable now, but like in the past, where if I don't raise this money in that time, this is over.
People don't get paid, etc.
Well, yeah, we actually in that point people were getting paid, but we weren't, and like and all that kind of stuff. But eventually we won't be able to pay them, and we were talking. It's fine margins, man. Yeah. Like it's very fine margins, and it is on you, and you gotta face that. But when you do face it and you get through it, like that's the growth that comes with this. It's like. No one would ever volunteer for the feelings I felt in that room just before I went up on that stage, right? You don't want that feeling, that anxiety, that stress, that pressure. Like, you wouldn't invite it on yourself. But it's incredible. It's an incredible life opportunity to feel it and overcome it. And I don't know if there's many other roles. I don't know because I've only lived my life, right? But I don't know if there's many, many other roles or journeys that take you through that as regularly as this one does. Yeah. And I think that is super interesting.
And that, what you've described there in so many ways, like one, the personal growth that you experience from pushing yourself outside your comfort zone.
And being forced to, let's be honest. I don't think I would have done it. I don't think I would have self-motivated that way. The world pulled me through that.
But you did, no one had a gun to your head. You did self-motivate. You were like, I've got one shot. True. I have to do this. And Steve Jobs talks about this when before he used to go and do his presentations, which everyone knows now is like being like the best marketing iconic presentations. Yeah, but he spent like weeks beforehand reciting. He knew every word that was going to come out of his mouth at exactly the right time that was going to come out of his mouth.
There's one thing you can control, and that's your own level of preparation.
Yeah.
Right. Everything else, gotta let the world come to you. Let the put the energy out, and hopefully the world delivers. generally speaking, when you do put good energy out, the world tends to actually welcome you with open arms to some degree, but with a lot of tests. But if there is one thing you've got, is the ability to be prepared, right? And that I think that isn't spoken about enough, because also you want to make it come across like it's all like natural and like off the cuff or whatever, but the reality is like the people who are anyone who's really mastered their art, right, whether it be in sport or acting or business or whatever it might be, has put in shit tons of work to get there, to make it look effortless, right? Like to make it appear effortless, to be this. It's those lonely hours, when you're in a room, kind of going over self-editing, right? To a degree, like you're kind of, is that good enough? Is that going to really land? Like, it's the work. It's the work that gets you, and that's just the bit that we focus on. That's the bit that we see, but there's a great big, iceberg under the sea, which is really where it's done.
Yeah, and I'm going through something similar with the podcast right now. I'm still figuring out, like, I just said the word "like" there, for example. So these filler words you have, and you're trying to perfect your art the whole time. You've been in enough investor meetings or whatever, and you're trying to buy your time. And this is and these are the things that, if you listen to the best podcasters out there, using this example, they sound so polished. Yeah. And then all the time when you're doing the editing, you're listening to yourself back and you're saying, how can I improve in the future? What questions could I have asked better there? And all the time you're just refining your art. And that takes time. They talk about the 10,000 hours rule, that you're not an overnight success. It takes a very, very long time.
And nothing good comes easy, really. And even if it did, you probably don't really value it. Like, if you get a bit lucky now and again, because, luck does come along now and again. It's not all bad. Like, you do get lucky, but you don't value the lucky wins. You don't really, like, in hindsight. It's those stories, like, where I know what I had to go through. Whether people just think that's horseshit or not, it's not, by the way. But, like that moment, I grew as a person, right? And there are other times, there are other times where I'm like, that is what that growth thing means. And it's not this kind of like, this productivity porn. I'm up at 5 a.m. and in the gym, I have my shake and all that stuff. Like they talk about that as like a growth journey. Then I read the Stoics and stuff. There's nothing wrong with all of that, right? Like, to a degree, although I think, again, people are looking for the silver bullet, right? The growth is in the dark bits, the tough bits, the bits where something fuses in your brain and you change. Yeah. And I don't think that is with a 5 a.m. alarm bell every day.
And your cold shower.
But what they are doing is disciplining. And having that discipline, that's good. But I just think sometimes it's like misses the mark a little bit,
Yeah, people think that that's like going to lead to automatic success.
Yeah, it doesn't. You do actually need to actually think about some stuff and identify a problem and a need. And, I think that bit gets a bit lost because that's hard.
Yeah. But it actually brings me on to another question, which is, has there been something that you've changed in your life? It could be personal, it could be to do with business, that's had a very large ROI.
Yeah. Well, I suppose, funnily enough, like we sort of slightly mentioned it earlier. So I kind of in the early days, I really let my fitness go. I was just working constantly. So I didn't really do any exercise and I was pretty fat and unhealthy. And then, that didn't serve me well. And after a bit of a period where I just felt like terrible and like I can't do this, I got back into exercise. But because I was so, I was working like 6.5 days a week. Like it was not fun. I didn't want to go in the gym and then have to figure out, I've got to think about something else now. So I went to classes, because in the class, the instructor, it's like a meeting, right? It starts at 6, so you got to be there, because obviously on the gym floor I could always, maybe I'll go tomorrow. The class I've booked in, I'm going, I treat it like a meeting. Went in, the instructor takes care of it, the music goes on, and all you got to do is follow their lead. So I started going to these classes like 3 times a week religiously. I was there more often than the instructors were often, because I had nothing else to do, right? Well, I had lots else to do, but I had no real life. And that served me amazingly. And actually, after 1.5 years, like, one of the instructors said to me, "Why don't you consider teaching this?" And I was like 37. I was like, I'm not a super fit human. I'm quite fat, right? Like, really? What's going on? They were like, "But you're good at this, and you care, right? And you really care about this. Clearly, you've done it so much." So I was like, "Well, that's an interesting life challenge." And also, I knew I need to get better at public speaking. Well, nothing gets you better at public speaking than standing in front of 25 people with weights on your back, telling them to do, strength and conditioning class to music, for an hour. So I took that challenge on, and I started from relatively, I got relatively fit over that year of doing it, but I wasn't instructor fit. And then I went from 6 months to instructor fit. Wow. Right, which is because you got to talk, right? And that is hard, right? You're doing it and talking. It's like, so it's another level. And I qualified. I went back to school. I had to qualify as a personal trainer, a low-level personal trainer. It's in a classroom. Everyone else was like 17. I'm like 37. I was older than the guy teaching it.
This he's looking for a career change.
Yeah, they're like, what are you doing? It's like, what do you do day job? I work in IT. Like, why the hell are you doing this? I was like, it's like, because I like it. So I qualified, and then I started teaching. So I in my first year, I think I taught 400 classes. No, maybe not 400. No, sorry, probably about 250 classes in a year.
Wow.
Yeah. I properly, because the thing is, if I'm going to do it, I've got to be good, right? And again, just because you qualified doesn't make you a great teacher. It's petrifying at the beginning, like really, because also people are giving you resting bitch face all the time. Yeah. They're working hard. They're not smiling at you. So you got 25 people looking at you, and you feel that energy.
You're not a comedian up there, are you?
You're like, all right, okay. And again, they're not like, but you all your insecurities, your body insecurities, like you're like, am I too old? Am I too fat? Whatever. And look, I'm a good teacher. Like I teach well, and I do that because I did put the hours in, and I really care about the experience. And I also know that there is obviously way more fit instructors than me, like way more fit. But they teach from probably the discipline of fitness, whereas I teach more from I know that there are people in there who are here because they've got other struggles. They struggles with their insecurity, with their life, with stress, with whatever it is. And I know that this moment we have in the studio, like, often I had a class on Saturday mornings, and mostly it was like mums with young children. And this might have been the only opportunity in the week they had for themselves. And sometimes they were knackered, and they would just say, look, I'm not going to be very good today because I've barely slept, the baby's up all night. I'm like, don't worry. This isn't just about fitness. This is about you, right? This is about me creating an environment which they created for me, which just is a nod to it. We don't need to all talk about it. We don't need to acknowledge it because maybe that would make you uncomfortable. But that person in the back corner who never says anything, I hope that I'm helping, right? And also it means that I get to interact with a much more diverse set of people, in the studio than maybe I do in like SaaS or IT, which tends to be kind of more like, a certain demographic. And it's been incredibly fulfilling. It's difficult. I'm actually considering retiring now because it is getting really hard with all the travel. I'm only teaching 2 classes a week, and if I if I don't go for a few weeks, my own fitness goes down, and then I have to learn all the content. So I'm going through a bit of it's probably coming to the end, sadly, but it's been awesome doing it, and I've loved it, and the participants who come to my class regularly, the community we've built, the fun we've had, and some people have done incredible. Like there's a one woman in my Monday class. She was size 20 18 months ago. She's size 10 now.
Wow!
And she looks incredible. And it's not just my class, by the way. I'm like Mark, the Ozempic instructor. She's done incredible things with her diet and her discipline, and she's done other stuff. She's transformed her life, and I've got loads of stories. So that's been amazing, and I'm a much better public speaker now because
that's interesting.
I do it. And again, got out of my comfort zone. I mean, all my insecurities as a shy teenager who never even wanted to take his top off, right, on the beach, right? Now I'm standing in front of people teaching them fitness. It's crazy, but like you gotta face these demons.
The one question I've got in there is, I've got many questions, but I'm going to stick to one. But where do you find the time? You're a CEO of a successful business.
Everyone asks me this.
And you are
got a dog. I've got this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Where do you find the time?
You make the time. Like, but also I'm not a parent, right? I don't have children. I'm not married. So, I suppose the time that other founders would have with their kids is what I would consider is basically my free time. It's walking the dog, it's teaching classes and stuff like that. And I think, if you go back to the origin of that story, like why did I even start doing it in the first place? I was burning myself out working constantly. If I didn't make that time, I would never have made another 8. That was 2016 that started. I would never made it today if I hadn't prioritized it. And so you make the time, you know, and just like busy parents, like some of the most organized humans I know are people who have no time. And the most disorganized people are people who have got loads of time, right? Like, because it helps you prioritize, you put it in, you know, you got to be there. So I've got to be there at 6. Like I can't walk into that class 15 minutes late. Like that's not acceptable. So you prioritize it, and it's right. And it's good. And it's healthy. It's healthy not to be all about one thing.
Yeah, all about work.
Yeah. You got to have your releases. It's a long journey. It's a hard one. I don't know if everyone watches all this to the end, but like they'll be like, "Oh my god, I'm not going to do that." I don't know. I'm being very real about it. It's super difficult. It's very fulfilling, and you've got to make time for other things. Otherwise, you'll never make it.
Is that a lesson that you've had to learn yourself?
Yeah.
Have you been in a period where you were being burnt out, you were working long hours,
multiple
etc.?
times?
Yeah,
multiple times. And you know, I've had struggles with mental health in the past as well. Like I've had depressive episodes, and strangely enough, actually, more recently, it hasn't happened so much. But I think I've got better at like anticipating it and that feeling. You know, that sort of niggly. I don't know if anyone's ever experienced it. If you've experienced it, you don't have to admit to it if you don't want to. Like it's good to talk about it. Like in the past, I almost ignored it. It was like, oh, I hope that goes away. By the way, yeah, I'll just speed everyone up. It doesn't go away.
It doesn't go away.
It gets worse, right? And so now when I start to feel it coming on, I've got my methods for how I can either calm it down, prevent, and things like that. But no, I've been there, you know, and I don't always get it right, you know, like I don't always get it right. But I also now know, thankfully, having gone through multiple experiences like this, I know I'll come out the other side. So that is comforting, but you got to let it play out sometimes. It's tough.
Yeah. You mentioned their methods. What can you give us an insight into what some of those methods might be for you?
I will caveat it by saying, just because it works for me doesn't mean it should work for you. I think you've got to find your own, right? So for me, a lot of my anxiety, or you know, if it's an anxious episode or if it's a depressive episode, comes where I feel one, obviously there's the burnt outness, but there's also a feeling of like not being in control. And there's a lot of things that I'm not in control of, right? So the best way for me to start to feel, even if it's sort of a bit phony really, but to feel that I'm not completely out of control, is to start having small wins. So it's small stuff. It's things like getting in the shower and washing your hair. It's like taking the garbage out. I've been in America too long. It's taking the bins out. It's unloading the dishwasher. It's cleaning all your clothes. It's having a clean house. It's basically, you know, getting your admin, paying that bill, you know, doing that thing. These little micro wins, like, and then you get into a little bit of a flow state, and it would be easy to mock because you're like, oh, he's a really successful CEO and he thinks washing his hair in the shower is an achievement. Well, sometimes it is. Right, like, and you use that, and then you don't just stop. You're like, I don't shower. Right, now I'll go back to bed. No, now you're up. Make that bed. Don't get back in it. Now go do that. Get out it fresh air. Get out like oxygen, bit of vitamin D. Having a dog is super helpful because he has to go out all the time.
I've got a puppy in the moment,
right?
So I know this very well. Yeah.
I don't miss that stage. I'm so super cute, but wow, you know, yeah, it's hard. The teenage years are worse. Sorry, he's just got 2 now. He's 2 now, so he's got thankfully calming down a bit. But it's incredible. And then actually, having having something else to love. To not like live in your own head too much, which is, if you're on your own, that could be quite bad. So sleep, all the classic stuff, exercise, like it all helps. But the problem with all of that stuff is like everyone knows like sleep well, exercise, all that. Like for me, there's a little bit before, which is like, okay, fine, but how did I get to that gym in the first place? It's not like I go, I was just gonna pop out of bed and go do a workout. Like there's an incremental journey on the way, I think, and that's where I think these micro wins is how I get back into feeling like I'm achieving again, like I'm competent again, like I'm worthy, right? Like I'm okay. But again, you got to find what works for you, and it's even talking about it. It's a little embarrassing, if you know what I mean, because you're like, God, that sounds a bit, but it's just what it is. It's what it is.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that as well, because we all have our own struggles, and we all sort of suffer in silence. I think men also have a real problem with this as well.
That's a big problem.
But but being able to resonate with somebody and say, like successful CEO who's also a fitness instructor and doing all these things, but he also struggles too. I think is incredibly important to share.
Everyone does. Everyone has a past. Everyone has something that went. We're all carrying. And I don't want to overindulge in like, oh God, something that happened when you were younger is like really, but it does shape you, right? Like life shapes you. That's just part of it, right? And it's good to acknowledge it. It's good to understand it, and I think it's very comforting to know that everyone has it. Not because it's like, well, if I'm suffering, I want you to suffer too. It's not like that. It's more like this is normal, and we need to normalize it. In many ways, sometimes we've over-normalized it, if I'm honest. Like, I do also think that now, in the modern world right now, we're a bit soft, right? Like, we don't kind of, we hit that adversity wall and then we just stop. Like, bursting through it is part of growth, and pushing yourself through. Again, like all things in life, the middle is the right answer, right? It's not like, oh, right, I'm having a mental health day because I'm feeling like I've had to work, I've had to do meetings, I've had to pitch investors in the middle of a depressive episode. Wow. It's horrific, but I did it, right? Because I had to, because I mean, the sand time is running out.
And I can only imagine like the level of imposter syndrome that you start to face in those moments as well.
It's beyond surreal. That's the point where you think, am I in a simulation?
Yeah.
Because it's utterly bonkers, but it's what it is. And I think actually that's actually what the real lived experience is. And it's just that maybe historically, well, we've always talked about it, because if you go to like culture and art, like goes back as old as time, people talk about this stuff. So it's obviously been there, but we're just dealing it in a different way, and we've got different challenges these days.
Do you mentor anybody else, any other founders and business owners or anything like that?
I have done in the past, and I found it really fulfilling. I don't really much at the moment, because I genuinely am running out of time, like, with all the travel as well and stuff like that. So I haven't done it recently, but I have in the past, and I really enjoyed doing it. And I think that ultimately, probably when my journey with ScreenCloud ends, that's probably what I will go on and do, because I think I can be useful. And I think also in the second half of your life, right, which I'm very much in now, probably, certainly, I think there's something switches in your head in middle age, I think, where you start to think a little bit less about yourself, like not completely, obviously, but things like service start to feel like something you actually really want to do, like serving other people, helping other people. That becomes more of your ambition. And whereas I think in the early part, which is not wrong, it is about you and your own journey and things like that. It's kind of the whole like, put your mask on before helping others. Like, I think there's a bit of that in life. So I think in the second half of my life, I'd like it to probably be more in the service of other people, but I've got to finish this bit first.
What is next for either you or the business in that case?
Well, we're on this growth journey now. We're over $25 million in ARR. We're profitable, growing well. We're getting these big enterprise customers. So I think it's really like seeing that out. Like, there's nothing dramatic in terms of what that's going to be, but actually just achieving it is in itself hard, and the journey we're on. So I'm going to see that out to the point where I'm no longer useful, and then I want to be useful somewhere else. And I think there's quite a lot more where I can still be useful. Will
you look to angel invest, do you think, after this?
I did do some angel investing, actually, a little bit of angel investing, because we had some money in our old business, which we then sold when ScreenCloud. So we didn't sell it for loads, but we did get some cash for it. And then I stupidly, in like the 2021 era, I angel invested quite a lot of it. So I'm not sure what the return on that will be. So there's a lot of losses, but there's a couple. I actually did Whoop, which was pretty good. That seems to be going pretty well. So there's probably some good ones.
You angel invested into Whoop?
Yeah. Well, through a syndicate. So I'm not going to pretend like I was like buddies with Will. So yeah, I think. I mean, I see the Whoop band around a lot.
That must have made a pretty decent return.
You'd hope so, but I don't know yet. But all I know is all the ones that have really died.
That's the thing about angel investing, though, isn't it? That
yeah. The second year is the worst year, because all of your bad mistakes show up, but your winners, take say 5 more years or something. So we'll see. So I'm a little bit burned from that, because I was a bit foolish with how I did it. But again, I think selectively in the future, probably with I'll probably go to the point where I'd only go with people I really know, maybe in domains I really understand, and I'd like to. Yeah, I think it's important for the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Right, because people angel invested in me when I had very little to offer, and they believed in me, so I should pay it forward.
Yeah. Would you like to be a silent investor, or somebody that also you've spoken quite a lot about sort of giving back in this? So
again, I think it would be where can I be useful? Like I wouldn't, I wouldn't be able, if I did. I mean, if you do a proper angel investing portfolio, you probably need to do quite a number, and obviously you can't be involved in all of those. And to be honest, some of my best investors are silent investors who just back me when I need them and then let me get on with it. And we've been very good at keeping them up to date. We send a newsletter every month with a video explaining what's going on. Well, it's actually now every quarter. But so we've been good at investor relations. But yeah, I think where it was important for me to just be silent, I would be silent. And if they needed me for some advice or whatever, then I'd happily be active, but I wouldn't force myself in. It's like some people do, which I think is a bit weird.
Yeah, and I think that you sort of fall into the trap of when you give somebody money and then telling them how to run their business.
And also, no one good ever does that.
Yeah.
like that is a massive red flag. Like that person doesn't know what they're talking about. They're on some weird ego trip where they want to like heavily influence early stage founders, and probably just I don't know. I don't get it. I don't get why people do that. I mean, I had all sorts of weird terms thrown at me from certain angels back in the day, which was just like bizarre. Just cut a check.
Yeah.
Take normal terms and just fuck off.
Yeah, believe in me and the story. And the numbers too.
And if I need you, like there, but like, there is a lot of skullduggery at the early stages, unfortunately, and a lot of snake oil, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, look, Mark, we're actually coming to the end. So
it's a Joe Rogan.
I'm going to thank you for this, because this has been a wonderful conversation. And it's been great to actually learn more about you, but also about the business that you do. But if people are wondering about the business, where can they find you? First of all, I guess the website. But I know you're also quite active on LinkedIn right now as well.
Yeah, LinkedIn is like the social channel I use. I don't really post much on other social channels anymore. But LinkedIn, I post every day, and it's a bit about the journey, but mainly about screens. Like that, my main mission isn't really this stuff. Like I'm happy to talk about this stuff as well, but my job is to make screens more widely adopted. And I really enjoyed the conversation we had about that bit as well. And so, yeah, LinkedIn is the place to find me. If you want to find out more about ScreenCloud, go to screencloud.com. We work with small companies and big companies, and if you think about screens, we're the screens guys. But otherwise, you do you. It's okay.
But I really appreciate your time, and I think that the listeners are going to get so much from someone who's got so much experience and knowledge to it. And
you've shared I got it more raw because I had a hangover.
Often where the best conversations.
Well, there you go. There you go.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Mark.
Pleasure. Thank you.